Hey, what's up everyone? Your buddy Matt here. Welcome back to my channel. If you recall, about a month ago, I ended up putting up a video on this magnificent beast back over here, the Toro Groundmaster 52. In that video, we got its old 16 horsepower Briggs & Stratton roaring again. And if you also recall, in that very same video, I said a little something like this. It's the first step to possibly many to do something cool with this as a project. Like I said, I don't think I'm going to be using it to cut grass. Haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet. I got some ideas, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Now, what I actually had in mind for this tractor was to take off the mowing deck and to integrate a snowblower attachment in order to use it to snowblow my garage in the winter. But then I thought to myself, I don't think that 16 horsepower is going to be strong enough to power that snowblower. So I told myself, why not go with a diesel conversion? I'd go to the next auction, find a little diesel engine, and plop it in, you know, like a project. The thing is, when I checked out the auction catalog, I found something even better. Behold, ladies and gentlemen, a Toro Groundmaster 217D. Think about that for a minute. If you haven't figured it out, the D stands for diesel. Basically, all the work of fitting a diesel motor into this guy is done already. Other than a couple small changes, it's essentially the same tractor, except it has a 17 horsepower Mitsubishi 2-cylinder liquid-cooled diesel engine. Check this out. So if you notice, the frame is the same except that the battery is here in the fender. The deck is 10 inches wider, I guess because they could permit it with the larger, stronger engine. But other than that, everything's pretty much the same. From what I can gather, it's the same hydraulic system and hydrostatic transmission, the same PTO shaft going to the front. It's got the same size tires. It does have a larger engine hood. That's to accommodate the higher engine and the radiator. But overall, the project of fitting everything into this thing that would have been quite an ordeal is already complete. So the only issue is that I ended up buying this thing sight unseen. I didn't go visit it at the auction. It didn't say that it ran in the auction catalog. I bid it online, won it, and I just went to go pick it up. This is kind of what happened. I tried getting it started. It didn't want to start. This is how we loaded it up and got it off over here. So what's the project for today, ladies and gentlemen? We're gonna see if we can get this old diesel running once again. So other than cranking it over at the auction for about 2 minutes, trying to see if it would start, I mean, it was sputtering a whole bunch of black soot, but I don't think it was getting any diesel. And then I realized afterwards that I think it has an electric fuel pump. And if I look at the controls on it, they have seen better days. There's this kind of toggle switch over here that it's a spring return momentary toggle switch. There's also this button over here. That was the starter, so it would crank it over. I don't see anything for glow plugs. I know that this thing was supposed to have a key switch. There's also a broken off toggle switch over here. This is the throttle. It does work. Let's check and see quickly, does it have any fuel? It does. Give it a little sniff. Yeah, it smells fresh, I guess. Next thing we'll go with coolant. What do we got? Dry as a bone. Okay, well, anyhow, if we end up getting it started, we're not going to run it for too long, and there might be a little bit down at the bottom, but we'll see. We're going to save that for later. Next thing over here is the oil. I don't see a dipstick on it. I'm not familiar with these Mitsubishis, but I do see a plug, so this might be kind of a, might be a little dipstick on this guy. Let's check and see. Yeah, sure enough, there is oil in it. I guess we'll call it sort of close to the low mark, but just to get it started, I think we have enough. It is a little dirty, but it's a diesel, so I wasn't really expecting otherwise. Okay, so I just found something that absolutely terrified me, and that is the electrical diagram on this magnificent piece of machinery. Shout out to Toro for putting that for free. Operator manual, service manual, parts manual, everything on their website. That was great. And I wanted to see exactly if there was an electrical fuel pump, because I suspected that that's what this was. Sure enough, this is a fuel pump and filter coming in from the diesel reservoir, the tank, and then going off to, I guess, a secondary filter, and then going off to the injector pump. There is no electricity hookup. There's no wire hooked up to it, and that would have been ripped off. I don't see anything hanging. And then I noticed that it has a fuel pump solenoid that doesn't appear to be hooked up either. What controls that solenoid, you might ask? An engine control unit. Yikes. I haven't found it yet, but I guess there's a control box on it, and when you look at the diagram, there are a bunch of safety switches that are interlocked together to prevent this thing from starting if ever I guess you're not, seated on it, or if your PTO's engaged or whatever. And if you look at this over here, like we've kind of already seen, this thing has been modified. What I'm worried about is the fact that we're missing actual wires. Kind of nowhere to be found. So first things first, let's go ahead and just open this up, see what's in there. Maybe that control unit's in there, and then see how we can get the key hooked up, because I have a hunch that the first thing we have to do is get the electrical sorted out in order to get fuel. I mean, there is fuel in the tank, but when I tried cranking it over at the auction site, it wasn't getting any fuel. So let's check that out first. Get this guy off. All right, so after a little bit of fighting, I ended up getting the throttle actuator off. I had to kind of pull on it pretty hard to get it past this PTO, the blade engagement shaft or what, and I'm just getting kind of more and more demoralized as I go. First off, I kind of get the feeling that this diesel video is going to turn into more of an electrical troubleshooting video. Second of all, once again, household electrical wire. Always the hallmark of shoddy craftsmanship, so that kind of scares me. When I look at it, well, I did get something right before. This is that little heater element, I guess, that says that your glow plugs are ready or what. So anyhow, that's there, not hooked up anymore, but yeah. What do we got here? So we got the famous start button that I know worked, because at the auction that's what I was using to sort of get it going. It is hooked up to the starter somehow. That broken off toggle switch next to it was at one point hooked up. Does have, I guess, something hooked up to it, but then it's missing something. I mean, there is a loose wire. Does that look like it would have gone there? Possibly. Okay. Towards the front, or I guess this would be the back. All right, we got a ground. A ground over here. That's hooked up to this wire that may or may not be original. This one definitely isn't. And what's that one hooked up to? Over here we have, all right, that, I guess that only functional toggle switch. Okay, that was is that a momentary switch we said? Yeah, so that's temporary on, doesn't work the other direction. So that, I'm assuming that's going to be for glow plugs. Oil pressure, yeah, oil pressure light is not hooked up. All right, let's see what's in here. There's some more electrical stuff. By the way, 3,900 hours on on this bad boy. Almost brand new. This is the voltmeter. Needle looks like it's broken, and this guy is unknown, most probably the ammeter. All right, let's get this guy off. Maybe we'll find that famous engine control module. Let's see. All right, so I would have assumed if I was a Toro engineer in the early 80s that I would have put the engine control unit over here. I guess that's proof that sometimes great minds don't end up thinking alike. All we have in here is the ammeter. We have this voltmeter, I guess, that's not hooked up. And then we got this guy over here. Did I say ammeter? I meant hour meter. Here's the ammeter over here. And then... yeah, well, okay, that was a little anticlimactic. Didn't really figure anything out there. Let's carry on. All right, so if we come over to this side of the motor, there is a wiring harness present. We got the glow plugs. We got a, I guess, I don't know, temperature sensor or oil pressure sensor. Not sure yet. This over here, look at this. We got a fused... still good. Some kind of, I guess, aftermarket, or this would have been added in, some fused wire over here. And it looks like stuff is going back towards that way. So let's pop this seat open and see if we can find anything interesting under there. Now, as we can see, there's not too much more behind door number 3. It's just that I guess all the wires sort of come along and go back towards that cobbled together control panel. All right, at least this wiring harness looks a little more stock than the rest of it. Now, sometimes I ask myself, why do people send stuff to the auction? In general, I mean, I've been burnt less times and I've gotten really great finds. But every once in a while, you fall on things that you sort of get the feeling that someone was like, you know what, just send that to the auction. Make it someone else's problem. I kind of have the suspicion that that's what this thing's turning out to be. Anyways, carrying on. All right, so I got the trusty multimeter out. Let's hook it up to continuity with the beep function. And let's try to figure out how this thing is currently hooked up. I took a quick little look over here. What I notice is there's a wire. All right, there's a wire that goes, this orange wire coming from here, that's coming from the red wire, this famous electrical wire. So red, orange goes off to here, which would bring power to this switch, and then it goes off with black and goes all the way up and brings power to this switch. So I have a hunch that this would be the positive 12 volts coming from the battery that would sort of send 12 volts to the entire circuit. Let's validate that. So let's just put our tester over here on one of them and get our other lead. All right, so we got, that's it. So there's continuity here, and we said we wanted to see right over here. Yep. Okay, so let's guess that this red wire here is the positive 12. And we can validate that. We'll check and see if we have, yep, continuity between, let's say, the positive battery post. This positive battery post goes to the starter, so that's fine. And then this fuse over here is hooked up to there, and it goes off towards the front. Let's check and see if we remove the fuse. Nothing. Okay, so this 25 amp fuse that was added in is basically the fuse that protects the positive 12 going off, powering, I guess, all of our functions. So we figured that one out. So next off, what we'll do is we'll just validate our start. Like I said, I did have this thing cranking over at the auction when I went to go pick it up. So let's put it on there and try to figure out where that green wire ends up. I would guess that it ends up right on the starter solenoid. Okay, not very easy to see, but I'm gonna try to weasel in here. And sure enough, I have continuity on the starter solenoid. So that one's figured out. The next one that might be easy enough to figure out is, we said this was most probably glow plugs. So positive 12 on the switch, and this other big, what is this, like 12 gauge house wire, this black one over here goes back off. Let's check and see if we have continuity between this big black one and the glow plugs. And we'll check over here. Sure enough, we do. So the only thing left to figure out now is this white wire, and you know, I'm gonna bet that it was over here. So let's get our tester on the white and check and see what's going on, where this white ends up going. So I followed the current for that white wire down to the alternator, basically that, well, this wire over here. This guy right over here, white ends up going to alternator, I guess plus 12 volt, and then this ground wire ends up also going on to the alternator. So essentially, that covers all the wires that were hooked up in it as it was. So from what I can understand, you would click this on, essentially to have your alternator charge. There was always 12 volts present at all of these switches, so regardless of whether or not the alternator was on or off, and I mean, I don't think this would allow it to start or stop, because like I said, the solenoid, the injector pump solenoid wires are disconnected. This would be the start. This would be the glow plugs, most probably functioned, and I think the issue right now is that there is no wire going to the fuel pump. So there's no way this thing's gonna run without that. That's an easy fix. Let's just get a toggle switch hooked up to replace this one. That's gonna send 12 volts, I guess, to the alternator, but also to this fuel pump. And then we'll check and see whether or not it starts with the solenoid as it is. Either it's not gonna start or either it's not gonna stop. So, I mean, we'll figure that one out. We'll get the fuel pump sorted out, and that's where we're gonna start. Let me let you guys in on a little something that I kind of thought to myself before. At first I was a little bit bummed out that there were so many potential electrical issues, but then I told myself maybe that's the reason why it was sent off to the auction. I would much rather fix just a couple silly electrical issues than find out that this thing was sent to the auction because, I don't know, it just started puffing a whole lot of black smoke and knocking really bad, and they said, all right, send it off to the auction. I mean, if it was more of a, we don't know what the heck's going on electrically, maybe that engine is still in good shape. So I guess I'm sort of encouraging myself right now, but anyways, I figured I'd let you guys know what I was thinking in my mind, and I'm doing all these troubleshootings. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this guy that I made. I always have something like this lying around in my toolbox, and this is basically a start, like an on start switch that I made myself. If you notice, it's really just, this would be the off position, this would be the on, like a regular key switch, and then it has a spring return start. Now the way that this guy works is that you have your power, your positive 12 volts coming into here, into a normally closed switch. But in the off position, the normally closed switch is actually activated. So it's open. This is an open circuit, so nothing powers through. When you put the key to the middle position, it ends up closing the switch, sending power to this second switch, but also to this wire. This wire is basically your accessory or your on. So anything that you want to get powered when the key is in the on position is hooked up to this wire. You also now have power over here that's going into a normally open switch. And the normally open switch is in the normally open position. It's not activated. It's not activated when the key is off. It's not activated when the key is on. But when you go to the start position, it gets activated. So I activate the start. Now that completes the circuit and sends current to this wire. So if you haven't guessed it, this guy goes to your starter. This goes to anything you want to have 12 volts when you put the key to on. And when you turn it off, the advantage is, compared to the way they wired it here, you end up cutting your power to everything else. So your starter doesn't have any current, nor does all your accessories. The way this guy is wired is it basically sends 12 volts to everything. So if you were to click the glow plugs at any point, you would send current to them. If you would click the starter, you would send current to it, but you might not have your fuel pump or your on actually activated. So that's kind of that's kind of a poor way of doing things. There's one drawback to a little switch like this, is that this is not a very heavy duty unit. It can't handle a lot of current, probably only about 10 amps. So in our case, we will not be hooking our glow plugs up to this, because I'm concerned that the glow plugs are going to be pulling more than what this thing can handle. The fuel pump, 10 amps, I think we'll try it. And the starter is actually powering the starter solenoid, not the starter directly, which we already know. But you want to make sure that if you add anything to this circuit that would pull more than 10 amps or 10 amps cumulative, let's say on your accessory wire, that you would want to hook up relays instead. That's beyond the scope of this video, but you just have to watch out about that. All right, so about 15 minutes later, what do we have here? I ended up removing all the switches other than this push button start switch. They were all in really rough shape anyhow. What I did was, because the push button switch, in my mind, probably can handle more current, I'm going to be using this one as the glow plug switch. When I press on this, I'll get continuity between the 12 volts and the glow plugs. I branch off my 12 volt circuit, as we said before, to go to my world famous homemade key switch. So we have 12 volts coming in over here. Then I branch off. When I could put the switch to the on position, I'm going to be sending power to that existing alternator switch, the white one, and these two brand new 12 volt wires. The first one going off to the fuel pump. I actually put the ohm meter on this guy, and it's not short and it's not ground. It's about 500 ohms. Whether or not that's good, we'll see in a moment. The second wire that I installed, this other black one over here, I'm just going to leave hanging, but I might use it to hook up that injector pump solenoid. That's going to be, we're getting ahead of ourselves now. And then the start wire is hooked up to the green one. Let's get a battery on it and click it to the on position to see whether or not this guy makes any noise. All right, so moment of truth, but I didn't want to just check the fuel pump. I disconnected it. We'll see if it turns, and if it does, whether or not it pumps fuel. We're going to turn this guy on. Oh, it's making noise, and it's pumping fuel. Shut it off. Wonderful. So, all right, so we got the fuel issue, I guess, temporarily sorted out. Let's check and see if we can get that coil to work. All right, so I managed with quite a bit of difficulty to crimp on two terminals on those two little stumps of wire that were stuck on there. One of them goes to that power wire on the switch. The other one is hooked up to, I guess I'll call it a temporary ground that I made over here. I put my multimeter on here, and I was able to validate that, yes, this is a proper ground. And I disconnected the fuel pump so that when I turn on the switch, we'll check and see whether or not this solenoid does anything. So let's get that switch on and see what happens. Oh, it's trying to pull on it. Let's see. Activate it. Can I just help it? What if I turn it off now? All right. Well, not too sure whether or not the solenoid works. However, I noticed that there's no room back here, but this plunger back here does move in and out. So I'm guessing that that's how I'll shut it off if I have to. Maybe with the fuel pump running or the engine on, it'll move a little freer, but it does look a little loose, so there's a bit of crap on there. I might shoot a bit of brake cleaner and try to clean it out first. Hey, you like that little guy? You like that? Does that feel good? So after a little bit of gentle persuasion, we're back in business, baby. Coming along. We'll go ahead and try starting this thing as is. We'll probably have to bleed it. That's what we'll do. We'll get the fuel pump hooked back up and crack open. Do we go straight for the injectors, or we might crack open the fuel pump? We'll see. I haven't decided yet, but I think we're getting close. It's starting to look more like a diesel start video, right guys? All right, hang in there. All right, so right now we see this is the injector pump, and then this is where the fuel comes in. Our fuel filter is back here. The secondary one and the fuel pump is all the way back there. We're gonna crack this guy open right now, and if we turn on the fuel pump, I would assume that we should see some gas coming out of there, some diesel at least, and we'll check and see whether or not we got fuel coming to there. So let's turn the pump on. Yep, all right. So we'll just get the air out. We'll tighten that back up as it's squirting. Good. All right, so we're primed up to the pump, and right now what we'll do is we'll open up the injectors right at the cylinders, and we'll see if we can get away with basically bleeding it from there. Okay, so believe it or not, we are right now 1 week later. I tried starting this thing. I cranked it and I cranked it and I bled it and I bled it again. I ended up having to resort to trying to put ether in it. It didn't even want to make an effort to start with ether. I took the valve cover off. I took a little look to see the valve clearance. Nothing, not perfect, but nothing that would have prevented it from at least trying to start. I actually ordered a compression tester just to have, because I don't have a diesel compression tester, and it was supposed to arrive yesterday and it didn't. Suddenly it was like undeliverable, refund issued, whatever. So I'm gonna have to wait, order another one, and wait until I get it. I edited up the video, and kind of getting to the end of a video where I would have wanted to start something and it doesn't end up starting, I kind of found it was anticlimactic. I'm gonna try to end this video with an actual engine that starts, and in order to do that today, we are going to take off the glow plugs. We're going to check and see if they even work, and then I want to take a look. This famous start or injector cutoff solenoid, I thought that you'd have to send power to it to click in and have it crank, but from what I can see with the spare ones that are for sale, they have a rubber cap that says push to stop. So I have a hunch that this thing has to be out, and I wonder, could it be possible that the injector pump is stuck in the closed position? That's what I'm kind of wondering right now. I'm not sure whether or not it should have started on ether, however. I mean, I think it would have with the closed injector pump, but anyhow, we'll try starting it with the cutoff solenoid in the open position, or what I now understand to be the open position. So let's try to have an engine start by the end of this video. Okay, so first things first, I'm gonna just kind of clean down the parts that I want to start taking off. If I'm gonna be exposing engine internals, whether it be through the glow plug holes or if I end up taking the injector pump off, I don't want to have too much nasty cruddy debris, and this engine's a little bit cruddy, so yeah, we're gonna just clean it off. So I'd say that one of the main differences between last week and today is probably about 10 degrees Celsius, and towards the cold side. So it's much colder, much windier today, much less pleasant to be working outside on this tractor. Number one, doesn't look all that bad, to be honest, but we'll test it. Number two, all right, let's go test them. All right, well, nothing can be simpler than testing a glow plug, really. You just put the 12 volt, the positive 12 volt on the connection end, and then you ground the body with their negative. Then you hook up your battery. And in theory, you should see it glow. Saw a little bit of smoke come off it. There we go. So plug number one is functional. as is plug number 2. Now I'd like to take this opportunity, now that the glow plugs are out, to crank this thing over. Now that we're going to have probably less compression resistance because we basically have our combustion chamber vented, I would like to crank it over and work on that injection pump, see if with the stop solenoid not activated, if I'm getting more fuel here up at my injectors. So let's try that, and I'll bleed it for about the 20th time that way. So for the first time in about a week, I'm feeling optimistic about something. As you've just noticed, there was fuel coming out. I disconnected the ground, basically the ground on that fuel injector pump solenoid. And we saw, I guess a decent amount of fuel coming out. But then as I tightened this guy up, I started getting a mist of spray coming out of the glow plug hole. I think that indicates to me that these injectors are firing off some fuel. Check it out. I'll try to get it on tape. Without further ado, now that we know that the glow plugs work and that I am getting a fuel mist in here, we're going to put the injector pump aside for right now and get those glow plugs back in, and maybe, just maybe, this thing's going to start. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to have to wait for that compression tester and check and see, if I have a compression issue. But anyways, let's keep our fingers crossed. All right, so we got the glow plugs back in, and we're going to try starting it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the current, or the 12-volt jumpers, right on the glow plugs, because maybe there's an issue with the wiring and it wasn't getting enough current going to the glow plugs. You never know. So put odds on our side. So we'll put the jumpers right on the glow plugs, and we'll give this thing a try. We'll also wait like a solid 30-40 seconds to make sure, we notice that those glow plugs took at least, 15-20 seconds to heat up. So we'll get them glowing nice and hot before we try cranking this thing over. We're getting smoke. It just doesn't want to start. Well, that excitement was short-lived. We're getting smoke, but it just doesn't want to start. All right, so another weekend later, I finally got my diesel compression tester. And just as a side note, I went to Princess Auto for the second time in my life. This store is absolutely amazing. This is what $400 gets you, but it's just a whole lot of hydraulic fittings down in there. And I ended up buying this huge 4-foot-long, 3/4-inch drive breaker bar. So you can just imagine the wheel studs we can break with that. So, all right, let's go check out that compression. So as you can see, I ended up splurging for the heavy-duty kit. Maybe it's overkill, but I can check either injectors on certain types of engines, and then some of them you put them right into the glow plugs. That's what this guy is going to be. So I think this is like an M10, and it's either one of these two. I think the pitch is a little different, so we'll select the proper fitting and get it on and see if we can check compression. All right, so I installed an adapter, not the one that was supposed to go there, and there's something a little fishy with my kit. It's supposed to be an M10-125, and it looks like it's a finer thread than that. So I found one that fit. I ended up putting an O-ring at the base of it to try to give it a bit. It doesn't go down and seat right at the bottom of the glow plug. But anyways, we'll give it a try. Just for your information, a brand new engine would have 455 PSI. What they call the repair limit is 370, and the service limit is 313. So definitely below 315, I'd say. This engine is going to be toast. So, all right, let's check it out. We're in cylinder number 1 or 2, one of the two. Let's try it out. All right, so we're not even at 100 on that one. Let's check the other one. So no, you're not seeing an optical illusion. We're actually 1 week later, much colder, much windier. We're going on a month now. I'm a little disappointed. When I ended up checking the compression with this thing, my gauge is doing something silly. I don't have the right tip. So I tried putting an O-ring, didn't work. And I wasn't able to get an accurate reading on this motor. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to try putting, I tried putting an O-ring, like I said, I'm going to try putting a brass or a little copper gasket on it and trying it again. I'll check the compression one last time with that. If that doesn't work, I'm going to put compressed air. Those little adapters, although they don't work well for the compression gauge, they do fit in and you can hook up an airline to it. So I'm going to try putting air in it, and I want to see, you know, I suspect that it might have a blown head gasket because we don't have any coolant left in the rad. So I'm going to try to listen here, maybe listen in the oil, you know, just listen here and there, and hopefully it's just a head gasket. If it's not, this thing might be going back to the auction. So, all right, let's try that. The last ditch effort. So here's the adapter, the only one that has the proper thread that fits into the glow plug. And normally this end here would butt up against the base and I guess create the seal, but in our case it's a little bit too short. So I tried putting an O-ring. That's what we did on the test that you saw the compression gauge working on. Now I'm going to try a copper gasket. I cleaned off as best as I could that surface, and hopefully this will create the seal that we desperately need. Perfect. All right, let's give it a try because this is unbelievably unpleasant out here today. Absolutely no compression. Is this thing hooked on properly? I mean, this is an expensive kit, but I'm not sure if it's a little bit shoddy. All right, that's it. Let's get some compressed air in here and see if we can find where our leak is, or if the engine's just scrap. Now, why is this guy leaking now? All right, so I reinstalled the rubber O-ring on here, got the old compressor out, and let's try putting some PSI in this guy, see what's gonna happen here. All right, that should be close to top dead center. Maybe I have a valve that's it's leaking here. Let's just see if any pressure in this guy. Nope. I don't hear anything in there, but we got air coming out the intake valve. Let's try and get this guy really on top dead center, and we'll take it from there. I mean, maybe it's a valve issue. So I rotated the flywheel around a few times. I also have air pressure coming out of the exhaust. Yeah, so maybe it's just as silly as a valve issue, but let's try the second cylinder, see if it does the same thing. I took the valve cover off because I wanted to just make sure that, you know, my valves were fully shut. I guess technically, but it seems like it's blowing by. These two valves, I checked them. I'm getting air out of the intake and out of the exhaust. Now we're set up for the second cylinder. Right now, these rocker arms are loose, so I'll just assume that those valves are as closed as they become, or as they can become. So there you go. Let's get the air in it. Come on. Ugh. All right, guys, I'm really sad to say, but I think this is gonna have to be a two-parter. Running out of time, and I kind of want to get this video wrapped up. I know it's long enough. and I think there's quite a few steps ahead of me. What we did find out, I ended up putting the air on the second one. It doesn't leak as much as the first, but with the piston going down, the exhaust valve was slightly open. I had to hold it with both my hands, so I wasn't able to film it. But yeah, a little bit less of a leak, but there's definitely some bypass going by those valves. So we'll retorque the head, do the valve clearance on it, and take it from there, but that's gonna be in the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, despite the fact we didn't get it running. There is snow on the ground, so snowmobile season is here. We're gonna start making the snowmobile videos again, so I got some really cool stuff lined up for you. Stay tuned for the next one. Signing out.